Welcome back to Bread and Butter, serving up the basics for Hearthstone improvement. This is episode 128. As usual, I'm joined by Pylet. Pylet, how are you today?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Yeah, this is another early morning that we have Pylet up, or at least early for Pylet. It's like, 10 a.m.? You're used to sleeping at noon?
On weekends, yes, when I can.
But we have a very, very special guest today, ZachO. ZachO, how are you today?
How you doing? I'm doing good. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, I apologize. I should have had a nickname. Is it not? Because we're supposed to interview it when we introduce you. You're supposed to have ZachO Blacko or something, right?
That's okay. It's fine. I have many nicknames. It's all right.
Yeah. So today's topic is using data to your advantage. Figured if we're going to have on the founder and primary contributor to the Vicious Syndicate report, who better to have and what better topic to have than data. So, ZachO, what have you been doing inside of the game of Hearthstone lately?
Honestly, that's a little bit of an awkward question because I haven't played as much as I normally do this expansion for obvious reasons, right?
Yes.
A lot of people are kind of disappointed with the expansion that hasn't really produced a lot of interesting new strategies to try out. So I am playing a bit. Right now, I'm playing a little bit of Protoss Priest. It's very strong. And Resuscitate is a pretty fun card to run in that deck. But, I haven't done much else right now.
That's fair. How about yourself, Pylet? What have you been up to?
About the same, because I've just been too busy and haven't had much time, or when I have had time, haven't had the energy to play. I did play a little bit more of the Discover Hunter with Neri after we recorded last week and was having pretty good success with that. I haven't played it since the patch, but a lot of what I was doing well into is still strong, so I think that will continue if it doesn't change too much. And then started playing around a little bit with Quest Warlock last night. I think I grabbed a list from Dreadeye on HS Guru and swapped out a couple cards. He was running 2 Sketch Artists and 2 Health Stones, and they're fine for Portal fodder when they're bad, but I felt like they were going to be bad too often, so I swapped those out for some Horizon's Edges and another Corpsicle. Still playing around with that, but it seemed okay. It seemed like it could win. I did finish the quest on turn 3 in one game, and that's good. So I don't think that'll be consistent, but we'll see what happens.
That's fair. And I can fully admit to being that guy right now, because I have been... I've started coachings with Language Hacker because I'm trying to improve. We've talked about this, don't have to get into that. But one of the decks that he had me working with is Starship Death Knight, because it's a really good deck, but also it has a lot of good teaching points and decision points, and making sure that you are able to maintain or to execute the game plan, but also deviate from the game plan when it necessitates. And we had the patch on Thursday. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And when it happened, I came in. I'm like, well, let's just see, because THL is coming up next week, and I want to see, is this still a deck I can bring? So I've been playing it and having some success. I was talking with I don't know if we were talking about it on the show. We were talking about how it was kind of gross how much not only do they execute their game plan, but they also gain 100 billion armor. And I never really got that much armor until this game yesterday, where I had I sent Pylet the VOD and the screenshots, but it was
disgusting.
170 something armor, and I got the what do you call it, the reborn guy, the one that got nerfed.
Yep.
And all the 1/1s. I had all the 1/1 starships back with Reborn. It was just a lot of fun. Outside of that, so I'm like, well, I gotta try to start playing other things. And normally I'm all over the place at the start of an expansion, but I played some of the Elemental Mage, which hasn't been great for me, but that could be just me. But it's been okay. And I've also been playing a lot of the Story Hunter with the Raptors, and that's been fun. Get a lot of games in, but I haven't really explored much. So tonight, when I'm going golfing today, because I'll talk about that in a minute, but I'm going to try to make a stream so I can make some content. I'm going to try to make some content because I've been really lazy about that. And I'm going to not go to bed until I've won one game with EveryQuest. So I may still be here next week when we start the next podcast, but we'll see how that goes. But ZachO, what have you been doing outside of the game?
The usual, nothing outside of normal life, I've been playing some Uma Musume though, and I've been enjoying that game a lot. It's actually a lot of fun. I was surprised at how addictive it is. So I've been doing that whenever I don't play Hearthstone.
What is that game? I've never heard of it.
Uma Musume, there's a lot of hype about it. I'm surprised you don't know, but maybe hasn't really entered your sphere of influence. But it's basically a race horsing game, but the horses are actually anime girls, and it's funny. Like it's real life horses from Japan that they've basically built stories for them as human characters, and they're basically, so you train them, and it's like a roguelike game. Let's say it's a combination of a roguelike game, a card game. It's a card game, kind of. There are cards in that game. And it's just, you race, you increase their stats, you give them abilities, and you try to, win races and end your career like as a legend. And then you can PvP. There's all sorts of fun. So I've been doing that.
Yeah, I've definitely found that since I work for the government now, I don't have access to, like, I can't read news stories about gaming while, I'm on break or anything like that, because all that stuff's forbidden. So, which is fine, but I've definitely lost touch with a lot of things since I used to work from home. Pylet, what have you been doing outside of the game?
A lot of work and a lot of marching band. Our band rehearsals have started up, so we had our percussion camp this week where I had a little bit of a good panic moment of, we have a really experienced section, a lot of upperclassmen, but they moved a lot faster than I thought they would, to where we got through everything that I wanted to get done all week in like a day and a half. Let's take a break. I'm going to go find something that's going to push and challenge you guys. So really looking forward to how they do this year, and then finishing up, getting things ready for our full band camp next week. And then I went ahead. I haven't played it much. I've only played like 30 minutes maybe of it, but I picked up the new Donkey Kong game. Especially once I saw that it was the same team that made Mario Odyssey, which was fantastic. That pushes me over the edge. I'll grab that quickly, and that game's fun. Got to smash a lot of things, which was a great de-stress right before going to bed the one night, and looking forward to jumping into that when I have a little bit of time again.
Nice. And for me, my family is on a mini vacation. I didn't go because when I started my job back in January, I took a vacation in February and I went negative into vacation time. And it's nice to finally be in the black, but I wasn't ready to do that again. We need to save it. So the mini vacation. So, as you know, I'm living in a different place and I live on the weekends, and it's the whole thing, but I'm at my house right now, and there's no dogs because they're at boarding, because it didn't make sense to like have me go pick them up and drop them off and bring them back and drop them off. There's no family and kids. There's no nothing. It's weird. It's quiet. It's just weird, but I kind of like it. Not that I don't want to have my family, but it's nice to have a little break. It's nice to be in your own area and just be able to, like, I slept till 8. I was going to get up and do yard work, and I'm like, you know what? No, we're just going to sleep and catch up and be good. It was great. But today I'm going golfing after not too long after the show. We're going to a nice course about an hour north, and it sounds like it's very hilly and whatever, which is not good for me because I'm not a good golfer. But, we're not here to talk about me golfing. We're here to talk about Hearthstone. And let's get to know ZachO a little bit. So, ZachO, how did you get started gaming, and how did that lead you to Hearthstone?
Well, I've always played video games ever since I was a young kid. As early as the 90s. I think it started... Well, I was playing... I liked Nintendo games initially. I played like Super Mario, the original Super Mario 1, 2, 3. The very first Mario games. I also played some Donkey Kong too. So that was my initial exposure to gaming, and then afterwards, my brother is significantly older than me. So when I was like, I don't know, 7 years old or something, he would play a lot of point and click adventure games, like puzzle games, things like King Quest
Yes.
series, Indiana Jones. and my favorite ever in adventure games, Monkey Island. And
Yes.
I love Monkey Island. I have all the Monkey Island game library in my Steam. Like all of the games, I have them. I've played them multiple times. I love point and click adventure games. That genre has kind of declined since, but that's what exposed me first to games and what made me love storytelling in games. Right? So that was the initial exposure to, like, it feels like you're reading a book while you're playing a game. I really liked storytelling games. Afterwards, a few years later, I got exposed to games, and as a kid, I don't know which company makes these games, right? I'm just playing them. I got Warcraft 2. Warcraft 1 was too old for me, I think, and it was like very clunky mechanics in terms of unit manipulation, navigation. But Warcraft 2 was the first Warcraft game that I played, and I really loved it. I really enjoyed the story of Warcraft. It hit a mark on me as a kid. Like the RTS aspect was fun, but not the main thing. But I really loved the campaign, the storytelling of that Warcraft game. And afterwards, by accident, I didn't even realize again that it's the same company. The Warcraft basically exploded the RTS genre, and there were a lot of RTS games. So they were like Command and Conquer, Red Alert, StarCraft. I played that. I loved that. Again, from a storytelling perspective, it was really fun. And afterwards, obviously, Warcraft 3, which was the game that probably blew up the Warcraft world the most and led to the creation of World of Warcraft as a game. And even though I didn't play World of Warcraft, I wasn't like big on MMOs. I liked like RTS. I played Diablo. I enjoyed RPG games. I enjoyed very much strategy games like Civilization. But yeah, like Civilization is one of my favorite ever genres. I really like strategy, storytelling, stuff like that. So years later, when Hearthstone came out, it kind of ticked all the boxes for me. Because it was Warcraft, which is a world that I was fond of, 20 years prior. Like, it came out, I think, Hearthstone in like 2014. So Warcraft 2, I was playing Warcraft 2 maybe in the mid 90s. So it came out like 20 years after I got exposed to that world. So yeah, I'm not going to play World of Warcraft because I wasn't into MMOs. But this is like I can explore the Warcraft universe this way, and it's also a card game, a strategy game, so kind of like ticked all the boxes for me. So I said, yeah, I'm gonna play this. So I got into it from open beta. From the first day on open beta, I played it. Initially, I was pretty casual in my level, but I really elevated my level and I became a top legend player. Playing Miracle Rogue because I learned from streamers, mainly Forsen, if you remember Forsen, back in the Miracle Rogue days. So I was a big Forsen viewer and a Forsen subscriber. And I learned from him how to play Miracle Rogue, and I was like top 100 with Miracle Rogue, and we got from there. I continued my enjoyment of Hearthstone since.
Nice. And I used to love playing all those Police Quest, Maniac Mansion, Leisure Suit Larry, all those. That was a thing. So I know we already have a long episode planned, but I have to ask, what are your thoughts on Civ 7?
I have a strategy with Civ. I do not play the game at launch because Civilization is usually not good at launch. What I do with Civilization is that I buy the game and I start playing it after the expansions are out. So like Civ 6, I got the game after all the expansions and the additional content came out because Civ at launch usually is very much a skeletal game. Like the amount of features that you have in the initial game of Civilization does not compare. Like I remember playing Civ 5 at launch and I didn't enjoy it. And then I waited a couple years, a few expansions, I came in and the game became a lot better. So with Civ, I just, I wait for the expansion. A lot of Civ players are like that. So right now, I still play Civ 6. Civ 6 for me is the best Civilization game ever. I have logged hundreds of hours into Civ 6. I have won. I am a advanced DD player. I got wins on DD with almost every. I am still on the quest of getting a deity win with every single combination of leader civilization in the game. So I'm very big on Civ, but I haven't really tapped into Civ 7. I'll wait until I get some expansions.
That's really really smart. I stream Civ every Friday night, just kind of casually, because me and my friend are going to be playing anyway. And we were playing Civ 6 forever, and it was really great. And then we picked up Civ 7, and I think you're 100% right. It's very skeletal. There's a lot of things that need to be filled in, but we're staying with it, and we're just going to try. We're taking a different approach with this Civ, and just kind of like learning it as it goes and picking up the new things as they go, and hopefully kind of. I want to try to get like 100% on everything, so that's almost impossible to do at this point on Civ 6. We started kind of late in Civ 6 world. We were still playing Civ 5, and then we switched over about halfway through Civ 6. I think Call to Power might be the best civilization, though. Civ 6 is really, really good, though. But that's just an opinion. This is interesting. There's a whole meta for how to play Civ. I like it. How did you go from a player, though, to starting the Vicious Syndicate report?
Well, initially, Vicious Syndicate was a esports team, like a Hearthstone competitive team. And I was a player. I was pretty good at the game, not top legend level, but I kind of since the days of Classic, people got better at the game, obviously, and I kind of didn't. I actually didn't play a whole bunch of Hearthstone in the early years after Classic. When GVG came out and Grand Tournament, I kind of took a small step back from the game. I did play, but not as much. But later on, there was a lot of esports hype. I think it was a period of Hearthstone. It wasn't just Hearthstone, it was in gaming in the mid-10s, where there was a lot of esports hype and people were building teams. There were esports teams and everything, and League of Legends blew up, right? And Hearthstone had a lot of teams as well. And my brother was intrigued by the esports environment. So initially, he said, "Hey, what do you think about, there's this esports team. It's a small organization in Hearthstone. Let's join them and try to kind of lift them up and help support them. What is going to be like as an experience?" I said, "Yeah, let's try that." And when we got into Vicious Syndicate, basically it was a competitive Hearthstone team, and it was not very well known. It was small. And the reason why it was small is because it didn't produce a lot of content. The players themselves were focused on just playing and showing up to tournaments and trying their best there. But they weren't very big streamers. They weren't aspiring streamers to the degree of like, I'm going to be a dedicated streamer and try to build an audience, because it's very difficult to build an audience, right? You need to have a lot of perseverance, and you need to stream even when you don't have a lot of viewers. You need to be consistent, and they weren't very consistent at that. And I tried to basically lift the profile of Vicious Syndicate by trying to figure out ways to produce content. And both me and my brother have backgrounds in analytics. And one of the things that we talked about is, that Hearthstone does not have data-driven content whatsoever. It had nothing back then. In the days of Whispers, when we started out, there was nothing. There was no websites that were picking up data. There was, API obviously is not open. It's not like League of Legends where you can go into multiple websites and see the exact win rates of champions in every rank. Hearthstone was like, it was a black box. There was nothing. And for me, as someone who has some competitive understanding, it was weird. Both of us found it weird that there was no data. There was no access to like, okay, what is this matchup? Who wins this matchup? Who is favored? Which deck? What is the overall win rate? Which is the best deck? Nope. Nobody really knew. It was just, just opinions of people. So we thought, let's try to build a database and pick up players from our community, or the small Vicious Syndicate community that had, we had a lot of players, orbiting that community, right? So we picked up Tracobot, like we used Tracobot in order to collect data from people, and we built up this database. And we initially made this report as we took the players from the competitive team and I tried to get them involved in the production of a report. And the report was more like, this is the popularity of the decks. And then every player was like a class expert, would bring his own decks and say, hey, this is my recommended build and such and such. This is how the report started. And over time, I kind of understood that I need to take, the competitive scene was fading. And also we realized as time went on that the competitive, like Hearthstone teams or competitive team for Hearthstone were not profitable. It was just like a money sink and a time sink. And if the players are not like fully dedicated to the content aspect, it's never going to work out. So I took more responsibilities of the report, and from a passive editor, I became a more involved writer. So if you see, the first reports of Vicious Syndicate were very written by multiple people, and then the reports became more about a concentrated writer over time until I just completely took over as the, eventually Vicious Syndicate, the competitive team broke apart and went away. And what was left was this content, because me and my brother knew that the only way to get known in the scene long term is to produce content that people want to read. People want to check it out. Nobody really cares about a singular player doing this or that in a tournament. If that player is not a streamer, nobody's going to care, right? Like, they care about Dice because he's a big streamer. And he goes to a tournament, they'll cheer him on. Or they'll care about Firebat because he's a streamer. They're not going to care about a random dude, right, who just shows up to tournaments. So that was the thinking. Eventually, Vicious Syndicate became, the edgy name remained. It's an edgy name of a competitive Hearthstone team, right? It's not a name of a data analytics organization. But I decided that we weren't going to change it. We're going to keep it as it is, as a mark of what it used to be and what it became.
I used to root for, and yeah, so you could also have a little bit of the flip. I mean, I hear 100% hear what you're saying, and I agree as far as you cheered on the streamers. But I did used to like when Hearthstone would take some of the newer people to the scene and tell the stories about them. Like, that's how I found a couple of streamers I like Ant. I found Ant because he made it to the tournament, and they were telling his story, and when they actually used to put effort into the content of like, hey, this is about this guy, and you get to follow the storylines and all that. And I thought that was always good for following people and finding people to root for. So Vicious Syndicate was the name of the esports team. Do you know where the name came from or why I mean, it's edgy, yes, but do you know why they called it Vicious Syndicate?
I think, like, the person who named the name never explained it to me, but I think it does have some meaning. I don't remember, actually. I think I may have forgot. It does have some meaning, but I honestly don't actually remember what it was. Whether it was like a TV show or some game. Or actually, I think it might be a Cowboy Bebop reference.
Yeah.
I think it's a Cowboy Bebop reference. Do you know Cowboy Bebop? Have you watched that show?
No, I know they did a live action version of it a couple years ago on one of the streaming services, and I know it's a big...
So the big villain in that show is named Vicious.
Ah.
So, and he had a syndicate there. So I believe that the name actually came from Cowboy Bebop, which I can get behind. It's an anime, and I do enjoy my anime sometimes. So I believe that's the origin. So...
No, that's fair. When you said you didn't know, I was going to put the call out to have people make.
I actually forgot.
Origin.
My head, my head was like, I had a little bit of a block, and I forgot, and then like I remembered, because it was like I thought about it years ago, right? And then actually I didn't know it. Like, he never told me that. It's the followers of the supporters themselves years later on Discord asked me about it. And then said, oh, I think the name is because of Cowboy Bebop. And they explained to me, it made total sense. Like, it has to be the origin of that name.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. Now, I understand what you were saying, that, hey, we wanted to have data-driven. You found a way to try to make things more competitive. Did any of the motivation for the report come from trying to be like a counter to the Tempo Storm report, which was basically a report based on just kind of opinions?
We didn't really make a report because we said, oh, Templar Storm are doing this and we're gonna do something different in order to compete. We just treated, Tempestone was not the only source. There was also I think Team Liquid had a similar kind of ranking where they ask pros which are the best decks. To me and my brother, it just seemed like this is not reliable. Like, it's just not reliable because it's just word of mouth opinions of people. They don't have like a reliable way to know whether deck A is favored against deck B. There is no data about it. And people can be wrong, right? Based on their experience. Even today, we know that top Legend players can have a skewed perspective that is very reliant on what they play, what they experience. And that may not reflect even the larger sample of their level, may not be reflected by their own narrow experience, right? So we just didn't treat it as, we're going to be the pioneers. We're going to be the first to do this thing. And this thing is going to be naturally superior to everything else because it's the one way to get data. I didn't really care about competition. Like, it wasn't about making competition. It was about making our own thing and being confident that this is going to be the best thing.
Fair enough. And you've mentioned your brother a couple times. I'm thinking of him in as my brain, and since you're ZachO, he's ZachO. But that's just, my own mental.
We're both Zach. We're both Zach because our family name is actually Zach.
Oh, got it.
Yeah. So we're both Zach. His gaming ID is Pro Zach. The reason why his gaming ID.
So he's a relaxed gamer.
No, it's not. It's not because of Pro Zach. It's not because of the pills. The double meaning here is he is a professor. So he's Professor Zach. He's a PhD in accounting, and he is a professor in Ohio State University.
Yeah, this just sounds like a endorsement opportunity, just asking to be asking to happen somewhere. So you decided to do a podcast on top of everything else, and you already put a lot of work into the report. How did that start, and how else has the VS report evolved since it began?
Yeah, so the podcast was honestly a whim. It was a Discord interaction of, I think, one of the supporters, one of our Patreon supporters or gold subscribers, said, "Hey, how about you guys do a podcast?" And Hat at the time was working with me on the report. He was helping me. He was one of my assistants in the report, one of my class experts, or one of my one of the people that I trusted the most at the time. And he was obviously a supporter as well of Vicious Syndicate. And, somebody said, "Hey, why don't you guys do a podcast?" And then Hat naturally said, pinged me publicly and said, "What do you think?" And then I said, "Sure." And Pat at the time obviously was the king of podcasts. He had multiple podcasts on, and I didn't think he would have the hunger to do another, but Hat is insatiable. And we said, let's try it out. Let's make a podcast. And we knew that this podcast would be very different if we did it than other podcasts, because it would be very analytic driven, and it would be a complementary to the reports, and would be very competitive focused. And we tried out a recording, and we liked it. We had fun. We had chemistry. We enjoyed talking together and doing the podcast together. And eventually the podcast evolved into not just a competitive thing, but also game design insights. It evolved into something more. And it became obviously the voice that it is today, where, people post the summaries of it on Reddit and everybody reads it or listens to it. And I know that Team 5 also listen to it. Not sure every week, but they do. They are aware of it, very much so.
We really like it. And obviously, like you were saying, everything about Hat, Blizzard, bring back Hat. Come on now. It's stupid. But what I loved about Hat during that time when he started Vicious Syndicate is he was, like you said, he was doing 3 podcasts plus guesting on others. But he had a different role on each podcast. So the Angry Chicken, he was kind of like the expert he would kind of explain things to a level, because Angry Chicken was more of a casual Hearthstone podcast, casual player. So he wouldn't go overboard with the analytics or anything like that, but he would kind of okay, wait, this is kind of what you need to know about things. Then with Coin Concede, he was the host, and just generally he was, I think, most hat there. And then on your podcast, he was kind of just he kind of like his job was to kind of lead you into things and just kind of help you transition and maybe give you some things to transition to and all that. So he played 3 different roles.
He was a sounding board. He was a sounding board in the Vicious Syndicate podcast. Like, he knows his stuff too, but he was a sounding board. And yeah, he had very different roles. So I think in some part that helped him because he needed to act differently in every podcast. Every podcast felt different for him, a different experience. And this is partly why he kept going the way he did for that long. So, and yeah, obviously we all hope that Hat will be back at Team 5.
But you do know that if he had a joke he liked, though, it was going to be mentioned on every single podcast. Every single one, he was going to bring that one up. And you've had a couple different hosts too. We had most recently World 8, who has been on our podcast multiple times. How is that transition been going to World 8 and whatnot?
World 8 has been terrific. Since the first recording, I felt that he was really driven, and he was very, like, I remember the first recording where maybe he was slightly nervous because he didn't really he wasn't used to it, right? He didn't have any experience of being a podcast host, right? He was a guest and he could talk about his decks and his, he's a high legend player. He's a very, very good player. He's much better than me at Hearthstone. So he knows his stuff. But as a host, you have to be very different. You have to act differently. You have to talk differently. But after that recording, he just kind of wrote down in his head all the things that he needed to change, improve, or such and such. And then the next recording, he blew me away. So he was already good in the first recording. And then the second recording, he came so prepared after all the things that he learned the previous week. And that told me that he's like super serious about optimizing everything, including his role here in the podcast. So once he did that, I felt really comfortable. Like, yeah, this guy's going to be good. And what I enjoy with World 8 is that he gives his own insights to things, and he challenges me to answer more stuff and discuss more cards that maybe people haven't talked about or thought about, or gives you ideas on what you can do further to experiment with a deck. So I've enjoyed the interaction with him, and I've enjoyed arguing with him about stuff. It's really fun.
And I've really enjoyed it. It's a different podcast now, which is obviously because you have different hosts. And it's been nice because most of the time it was with Squash, with Hat, you would monologue and they would help you transition to the next monologue and all that. And then like lately, the last few weeks, it's been like, almost more of a less of a host and expert and more of like two people talking about cards. And I really like that. And it's been really fun to listen to.
Him. When in the interview, when I talked to him initially about the role, I told him, I want your role to be different from the way it was before, because you're a high legend player. You are highly engaged with the game. You can be more than just a sounding board. You can take an active role. So I encourage him to take that direction of just, challenging the current thesis, talking about new ways to optimize decks, thinking of questions and ideas before the podcast. So he's done that. He's been terrific.
And one more tangent before we get back on. Sorry, but this is all stuff. It's always weird having podcasters on that we've listened to all the time, because it's like I haven't listened to every Vicious Syndicate episode, but I've listened to most of them, and it's like I hear you in my voice in my head every week. So to actually have these conversations is great. So I'm not going to pass up the opportunity. I love your episodes. Like you had one this week and I haven't listened to it yet. They were talking about it on Coin Concede, where you really kind of get into a topic of things. And I know you were talking about quests and quest lines and design philosophy and all that. And you've had the ones where you talk about feeling versus stats and a bunch of those. How much do you like doing those episodes, and how much work do you put into those?
I enjoy these episodes a lot. Those are the most memorable ones, and they're also the most timeless ones. Those are the ones that you can kind of sometimes go back and listen to, and people have told me that they've sometimes gone back Sometimes Hearthstone is in a design spot that reminds them of an episode that I talked about in the past, a subject that could be relevant today. And the timeless episodes are the best one. I really enjoy them. As for preparation, I'm going to be frank with you. I talk to myself before the podcast. If I know that there is a recording coming up for a podcast episode, in the morning when I wake up and have my coffee and stuff, I start talking to myself. I start giving myself a speech in order to practice what I'm going to say or how I'm going to, move from subject to subject. So sometimes, if there's a person in my apartment at the time, then sometimes they come to me and say, "Who are you arguing with?" And I'm saying, "No, I'm just talking to myself. It's it's okay. I'm just talking to myself." Yeah. So I don't go on 1 hour monologues, right? But I do think to myself about how I want to express myself, because obviously you may not notice this, but English is not my first language. Even though I am very fluent in the language, and I spent my toddler years in New York City, so I may have picked up some English there and some of the accent maybe, but generally I do some mental practice before I go into those deep episodes. And the ones about the meta, related to the meta, it's easier because I write the report. All the information that I talk about the report, I can express and further emphasize in the podcast, so it becomes easier. But yeah, it does take preparation. Like, it's not a lot of it. I do sometimes shoot things from the hip. There are some rants, but I do, if it's a deep subject, then I definitely think about it over the day or the day before, and just talk to myself.
And definitely, if you haven't yet, and I haven't yet, it's in my queue. It's the thing I'm going to listen to after this when I'm outside doing some gardening. Listen to this week's, because it's really going to touch on the topics. And last thing, I promise, and then we'll get back on the interview. I love when someone says, like, one of your hosts is like, "Hey, I think this card might be good, or maybe there's a way we can use this card." And you're like, "This card is trash. What are you thinking?" Or opposite, where they're like, "This card looks like garbage." Like, "This is the best card in the set." Those are like my favorite moments on the show. So excuse me. How else has the VS report besides the podcast evolved since it began, and what's next?
Well, obviously, the first reports I told you, it was very me being a passive editor observer, and then me taking more of the responsibility and taking an increasingly active part until the point where I became the sole writer of the report. And also we've added metrics. I think the first report didn't even have a power ranking, didn't have a win rate table yet. We just had deck popularity and stuff. And one of the ways that we really leveled up the report was adding. Previously, we would just bring decks that were played by some top legend players, and we would just show deck lists. We didn't optimize deck lists. The work of optimizing deck list, I brought it later on, like a few years later, where I started to say, you know what? With the data that I have and I've collected, and we've increased our sample sizes and stuff, I can actually build decks better than anyone else with the data and the metrics that we had. So we started, instead of quoting people and saying this person hit number 3 legend with this deck list and featuring the deck list, we would start to just put VAS deck lists that were approved by the data analytics part, which is what I do now. And I do it during Tuesdays. Whenever our report is on Thursday, I do it on Tuesday. The supporters gain access to that process. I do it kind of live. Well, I don't stream it. I don't stream the process, but I post deck lists for them live with every archetype, going over card choices. And they ask me questions about them, and I answer them, and I explain the card choices. But this is a data process that started later. This is the way that the report evolved. Also, we added Metascore. Metascore graph was something that was later added in the later years in order to give you a sense of the impact of each deck in the format, not just its current win rate, because there are a lot of decks in Hearthstone sometimes that are like have high win rate but aren't played much. So they're not super influential, even if they do win well. And the Metascore gives you a nice way to view which deck might be underplayed, which deck might be overplayed, which deck is more influential than others. As for ways to further evolve the report, I am careful about this because I don't want to reach a point where there is data bloat. Because part of the thing that makes the report so effective is that it gives you an underlying narrative. It tells every week, it tells players a story that is easily consumed and that they can take from and apply to their game. And if you start oversaturating the report with more metrics that may not be as useful, and things can get confusing. So the most important stuff, the core things about the report is presenting the field, explaining what happened if the previous week, whether a deck rose in play or not, whether it declined or not. Explain the win rates. Very important, giving you context about the win rates, because the win rates themselves often don't tell you the story, the full story, especially at the beginning of a patch or an expansion. The context is very important to tell people what's refined right now. Which deck has reached like close to perfect 30 and has no scope for improvement compared to a deck that may look like tier 3, 4, but we note in the write-up that this deck has a vast scope for improvement. This deck's build, the best build, is significantly better than the other ones. Here, play this. We tell you in the class section, you play this. This is the card that changes things for that deck. So the wording is very important. So we tell people what's good, what's not good, and how to play the good deck, how to build the good decks in the best way, right? Every deck in the best way. And this is a good a stream of information. And other metrics can impede it. Like I have a metric, an internal metric, for example, which is a skill cap metric. How difficult the deck is to play. How a deck improves its performance from, for example, platinum, diamond ranks to top legend. Now, the problem with this metric, if I present it in the report, this metric is not clean. There are other things that influence a deck's performance. Refinement, different builds, right? Only I, that I have access to the data and can see it firsthand, can tell you, oh, this deck's performance improves at top legend, but it improves by 2%, but only 1% of it is actually because of the piloting, and 1% is because of better card choices. So it's already a dirty metric. So sometimes I tell in the report, I talk about the most skill-intensive decks in the format, I mention it, but if I present a table of it, it would be very confusing. So I just leave it as, bits of information that I added to write up if I want to, but it's not as clean as a win rate graph, a matchup graph. Those are things that are objective, right? And like you don't infer. This is a deck's play rate. It's 17%. There's no games with that. So if I add a metric in the future, it has to be to fit the current narrative, the underlying story that I give. And it has to not be distractive, like because if it can distract players, then it's adding more is bad. You're adding too many cooks to the kitchen here.
You definitely have just told everybody that there will be no power creep in the Vicious Syndicate report. I like it, and high skill cap is what probably like your. I think out of the two catchphrases they say, I think you say a lot. It's high skill cap and also it's P. Those are probably my two favorite.
The light shower elemental. when he made that song, that's so good actually.
that was great. That was probably one of, if you haven't listened to it, that someone made a song with like a techno beat kind of song with Zach saying it's P multiple times. It's great. So what happens to the VS report if you decide to step away? Because I know there are times when you're not happy with the meta, but it's also a business for you, right? So how do you, what's the game plan if like you're done? Like, is there someone that can take over, or are you just going to shut it down? And how would that affect Hearthstone?
If I step away, then the VS report is done. There is no, like, I'm not trying to toot my own horn or overvalue you can't, like, you can't find a replacement for this. This requires you to, this is my job. Like, early in the podcast, you were talking about your job and what you're doing and how life has been going. This is my job. Like, this is what I do for a living. So it is very difficult to find a replacement for that, right? It's a unique role, and in terms of time, you can't do this part time, right? You cannot. The other issue is the knowledge. Like, I cannot imagine like building so much experience over the years and understanding like all the efforts of, card optimization. This is something that is very difficult to do and learn over years. You need to have the experience with it. The top legend players, the best players in Hearthstone, don't read data as well as I do. They can try, right? But there's a lot of things in the data. It's not enough to look at drawn win rate. There are a lot of moving parts. There are tutors that change the way, like drawn win rate is only good when cards are randomly drawn. But if there are a lot of tutors, if there are all sorts of effects that change the instances in which the card is drawn, then there are a lot of stuff there. Also, the behavior of the deck can influence the performance of cards in different ways. So all this knowledge, I just can't see how I lay it on thick on somebody else and he takes on. Also, I wouldn't want to see the report degrade. So if I ever left, then the report is done. What would happen if the report was done? Then people will just look at the data websites that websites are available. People who go to the Vicious Syndicate reports and read it, they do it anyway. It's not like people choose, I'm going to read the report so I don't need to look at H's Guru. They do it anyway. They do both things, right? They don't need to do one or the other. It's not really competition in a way, because basically the report, what it does is that it figures out card choices for you. So you don't need to go to H's Guru and look at deck sample sizes and card sample sizes and card performance and try to figure out what makes sense from that. I just do it for them. It makes it easier. So in terms of, I don't think if a report disappeared, then, good decks will not be known. People will know what the good decks are and they'll flock to them, right? Maybe optimization will be less accelerated, right? People will figure out the best cards over a longer period of time. But ultimately, data exists now. We were the pioneers, but there's a lot of data available on the web, on the internet, and people will try to replicate that to some extent. But I will admit that it's hard to replace that.
When you said before, when you decided to do optimization and stuff like that, I meant to ask you this before I asked that last question, sorry. Was there a particular aha moment where you were looking at some stats and you were like, everybody's playing this card, but when you don't draw it, you win 70% more of your games. This card is trash and doesn't belong there. Was there a particular deck or moment that kind of came into play?
I think there were, I don't remember specific instances, but I can tell you that players will run bad cards as long as their favorite streamer does. Like, as long as their favorite streamer tells them that the card is good, they will play it, and you can have entire expansions. Actually, we had that situation. I think the best example I can give you is Spirit of the Shark. During the second half of Rise of Shadows, you've had multiple top legend rogue players who insisted that Spirit of the Shark was good. And consistently throughout that period, that 2-month period, rogue lists that did not have Spirit of the Shark were better. They performed better in the data. It didn't matter to these people. But Spirit of the Shark was only supposedly meta-defining for that period of 6 weeks, and then disappeared and never saw play again. So that powerful meta-defining card called Spirit of the Shark was good for a period of like 6 weeks, never saw play before, never saw play after. Everybody agreed after that it was bad, but somehow during that 6th period, it was amazing, great, and if you didn't agree, then, VS report don't know what they're talking about. So there were, even after, but there were definitely instances before where I saw some cards that, like, why are people playing this in the deck? Why are they doing this? Or like when I saw decks that were where we were even recommending in the report because we were just taking decks from people. We weren't optimizing. And I told myself, oh, wait, this is wrong. I looked up stats and this can't be right. Maybe I'll do it myself. And then I'll start doing it myself. And it ended up being the correct thing to do.
How do you feel about obviously they haven't done too well coming out the gate with some of these expansions lately. It's been kind of a well-documented thing. We talk about it, but how do you feel they've been doing with their patch cycles? Because that affects you and your work, and like if they're the cadence of that, to use the word, how do you think they're doing with that? Are they doing too much, too little? Is it right? Do you think they're doing it? They got a good plan there?
I mean, you can listen to the last podcast I talk about it, about what I think.
Fair. We can save it for that. That's fine.
I mean, yeah, I think the timing of balance changes does not bother me. If a report needs to be postponed, that's fine, as long as you do well in your execution of the patches. Then I'm fine with whatever I can adjust in terms of scheduling. That's fine. Like that's not up to like. It's not up to me to tell them how to do their cadence. Though I do think it's my recommendation to them, based on experience, and nothing to do with the report itself, is that they should be doing more patches 2 weeks after content comes out rather than the 9 days. That, like, if they do a Tuesday expansion and they do a patch the Thursday after, right? That's 9 days after the launch of content. That's usually not good. The reason why it's not good is nothing to do with the report or whatever. It has to do with the fact that if they do a patch on Thursday, it means they probably need to lock it in around Monday. So they only have like 6 days of data to know what's going on before they make final decisions on executing battle changes, and just makes it less likely that they executed well, because even I have the data in front of me and can tell exactly what the matchups are, cannot predict if a deck rises exactly a week after launch, which happens often, and is not accounted for, then that causes problems. Obviously, if you have a huge outlier, right, that you want to address as soon as possible, just ban a card and wait for those 2 weeks. My opinion, patches straight after content should be 2 weeks after, not 9 days. 9 days gives you very little room for mistakes, let's call it, or things that you didn't notice or rose after you made the decision already.
Yeah, we can call that the Van Cleef patch cadence theory. I like it. So I think we already got the answer for this, but what's your favorite class and what's your favorite deck of all time?
Obviously my favorite class is Rogue. It's my most played one. I have the most win with it. I think second and third, pretty close to each other, is Mage and Druid. My favorite archetype of all time is Miracle Rogue in its multiple reincarnations. If there was some sort of Miracle Rogue in a format that I was probably playing it, I think that there was one Miracle Rogue that I didn't like as much, but mostly I enjoy Rogue decks with that playstyle. I don't like the Thief Rogue decks nearly as much. I enjoy the Miracle ones more. Though I haven't played much Cycle Rogue lately, even though it is a Miracle style deck, it's kind of gotten old at this point. I really liked it a lot when it had Ethereal Oracle. I felt like it was a lot more fun to play that deck at the time. But I will, like, Ram Druid, if there's a good Ram Druid deck, then I will play it. I enjoy Ram Druid a lot. Like Imbue Druid is a deck that I can have fun with, for example. Less so of like the ramp into Dunger. Like Dunger, no. Dunger, no. Low, no. If like it's just ramp to one card, then I'm not as enthusiastic about it. But Ram Druids that I like, I remember really enjoying Clown Druid. If you remember Clown Druid, where you ramp into Survival of the Fittest into Carnival Clown, I love that deck as well. But yeah, Miracle Rogue is probably my favorite.
Now, you do this for a job, like you said, and you're constantly looking at data, you're constantly thinking about things. Has this taken the joy out of playing for you, or does having all that knowledge and knowing that, hey, I know what I'm going to do here because I've looked at the stats, make it more fun?
It definitely makes it more fun. It also makes me a better player at occasions. So the thing is, I consider myself, like, if I play at my best and I try my best, I am a consistent top 1,000 legend player. I will usually sit at 400, 500 at top legend. The difference between me and top legend players, top 100 players, is that they take, so what I do, what's good enough to be a player at my level, you know how to execute your game plan at a micro and a macro level well. Like, you know how to do the best plays for the deck at every turn. You use your mana efficiently. You make good decisions reflecting your game plan. The difference between me and those elite players is that the elite players also make every turn under the consideration of thinking about their opponent's next plays. What they do is they play the way that I do, but they add another layer of considering what the opponent does and making the play that makes the opponent as uncomfortable as possible. Sometimes making the best play for yourself, sometimes lays a layup for the opponent to lay a smackdown dunk with their optimal play. So what the elite players do, they know how to make you uncomfortable, and you feel it when you play against them. Now, the reason why I haven't reached that level is that I have no interest in, like, I know what I need to do to get there, but it takes a lot of time, and I ultimately play Hearthstone casually. I have no ambition to be an elite top legend player because it requires, more brain power when I play, right? It requires more brain power. However, I will say that I usually peak in my rank at top legend. Usually I get near that level at the beginning of a patch or a beginning of the expansion. After I optimize decks, what I do, content comes out, expansion comes out, right? There is the day of refinement where I produce the deck list for the report and I share them with the supporters. The moment I take those decks and play them over those 2 days between Tuesday and Thursday, between the day I come up with the decks, the optimized decks, and until the report is out, those are the 2 days where I go on insane win streaks because I have suddenly an edge of information because I play only good cards in my decks. And if I queue up in a top 400 against somebody else who's a very good player, but he's not as knowledgeable as me about the best cards right now, I go on win streaks and I get nearer to that top 100 just via information because of the information superiority. I don't improve my play. I don't play as an elite player, but I get ahead because I have the edge. Then the report comes out and my advantage is immediately canceled. And I start losing because everybody net decks my decks and now I have no advantage. So it's fun I've always been a strategy maximizer. I play Civilization 6 on DD. Like, of course I maximize everything. I enjoy maximizing every turn and maximizing knowledge. So it's fun to come up with new findings and new ways to optimize decks before everyone else. And it's also very satisfying to watch as a report comes out and the deck that you optimized suddenly surges in its win rate because everybody's net decking you. Like, I like to look at those win rate graphs over time after a report comes out and the win rate lifts up and just like validating, and it feels good when it does. So yeah, there's definitely moments of enjoyment in my job, and it doesn't take the joy out of the game. What takes the joy out of the game is when the game isn't fun. It's not the reports themselves. I find a lot of fun with what I do.
Yeah, me and my friend we were playing Civ 6 on Deity, and he's much more meticulous about that stuff than I am. So I'd have done all my things and I'd be waiting for him to collect the next turn, and he's over there putting down tax and making sure everything matches up right. So I feel that. I know you don't have the desire to, but do you think that you could get to that #1 ranking, get to the Masters Tour if that was your ambition?
I think I would be able if I again applied what I told you about what makes elite players different from me is thinking more about what your opponent plays. I think I would be able to get top 100. I don't think I would be able to be a competitive top. I wouldn't be able to be a like someone like Fury Hunter or these super elite players because I don't have the mindset to sit and play the same game. Like, they play for hours before I'm not saying singular hours. They can play 10 hours of Hearthstone a day. That's not something that I can do. It's just like, I need different experiences. I can't just sit and play Hearthstone ladder, even when it's great, even when Hearthstone is great and I really enjoy it. I can't play more than like 3 hours, right? So I don't have the mindset to be and the patience to do that kind of stuff. So I wouldn't say that I'm able to match that level. But I do think that I can be better if I really put my mind into it. I would be closer to top 100, top 200 than what I am. Right now, I'm much better than Hearthstone than me. And I know this because I've worked with them. I've worked with people who have prepared for tournaments. I've helped them in terms of the data and giving them advice on core choices and how to optimize their decks for a certain field. I know what they do. They spend hours upon hours analyzing the game. I would never be able to match that kind of level. Like, their level is insane. People don't really underestimate, I think, how these players, how much better they are than just the average top 100 player at Legend. They are so much better than these players even. Like, they're a different level entirely. Sure, I can help them with card choices, with optimizing their lineup to the field. I can do that, but that's statistics, right? Navigating a matchup, they do it so much better than anyone else. This is why they're the best. And this is why, even though Hearthstone is a game that has some luck element to it, the best players float to the top consistently.
So how long do you think Hearthstone has left?
I am genuinely saying this without a hint of irony, but I think Hearthstone can go on until we're old and gray.
I'm already there.
Yeah, older and grayer. So I think that Hearthstone can easily go another 10 years, if not more. There is no reason it cannot. I think financially it makes a lot of sense. This is a game, if you think about it, has a dedicated player base. Even though it's an 11-year game, it sells bundles every 4 months, basically. Bundles that cost as much as a fully fledged game on Steam. The pricing, like, basically, it's an 11-year-old game that releases a new game in terms of income every 4 months, and low maintenance, doesn't require nearly as much support as, for example, I don't know, an Elden Ring, right? Like, think about the production cost of making an Elden Ring compared to the production cost of making an expansion. So for Blizzard, and even Microsoft that just acquired Blizzard, not just, but yeah, they look at this thing. This thing is a low maintenance game that is surviving 11 years, has a dedicated player base, and basically prints money for free. Why would you sunset this? Why would you cancel this? There is no logical reasons to do this. It would be stupid. Like, something that has such low cost compared to something like a World of Warcraft or a Diablo, or this is a game that was produced probably the highest net profit compared, I don't know, maybe the magnitude of profit compared to the hours and money invested to produce Hearthstone as a game, to launch it, the amount of income that it generated is insane. Probably Blizzard's actually most successful game. Not in terms of ceiling, right? Maybe World of Warcraft at its peak was more, had maybe larger revenue, but I'm talking about the effort put in, the time and resources put into what it produces. And let's not forget Battlegrounds as well, which is a relatively new game mode compared to early Hearthstone. It should survive for many years, and there's no reason why it cannot.
I think they could even double their staff and still make it a very, very profitable, better game, and still be lucrative and make everybody happy. But they won't do that. By the way, we have another host on the show. You might have forgot about him. Pylet, are you still out there?
I am still here.
What's news?
So, as we've alluded to, we've had a balance patch. We're not going to go through card by card like we normally do because we already have a lot more to talk about. But it hit for nerfs a lot of the early meta-defining archetypes. So, low druid, various demon hunter decks with Ball Hog and Aggro Demon Hunter, Cycle Rogue, Murloc Paladin was hit. A couple Death Knight cards that were kind of used in various decks like Buccaneer, as well as Menagerie support cards were hit throughout. And then a couple of new cards with Wilted Shadow, the Priest card that's been used to OTK people when you heal their face. So those are all posted and kind of bringing the power level of those down some. And then they did put a lot more buffs into this patch than what they normally do, where pretty much all the quests that we didn't see the first week, they did something with for the most part. Buffing those, a lot of them, they reduced the requirements to get the reward. A few of them, they changed the reward itself to make it a little bit cheaper to play, such as Rogue and Warlock. So all those are obviously in the patch notes that you can look at, but a lot of changes to try to shift power a little bit. When we're recording this, we're still less than 48 hours from when the patch went live. So, still seeing how all those are shaking up. But from what I have seen and what, early, meta stats are, some of them, more successful or less successful than others. Seeing a lot of Mech Warrior pop back up. Seeing a lot of Protoss decks rise as well. With Protoss Priest, I have seen a couple Protoss Rogues. Protoss Mage is still kind of sticking around as it has been, but still a little early to jump to too many conclusions. But we at least have seen some more experimentation than what we did the week before. Like I said, I haven't had a ton of time to play. I've played 3 games since the patch came out. So Tito, you've played a lot more. I don't know if you've seen much of the field change at all.
I wouldn't say I've played a lot more, but I've probably played maybe a dozen or so games. I've definitely seen a lot more Protoss stuff and all that. I know you had mentioned that you thought when the patch, there was a lot of kind of negative discourse around the patch. And I looked at the patch. I was like, all right, they're nerfing a couple cards on some of the outliers, and they're trying to raise the power some level. Maybe not enough, but I thought the patch was going to be fine, and I guess we'll see. Zach, what are your thoughts on the patch?
I think the patch was very difficult from the beginning because the standing position of the format was so bad. The quests were so bad that it was very difficult to buff them in a reliable way, right? So like if the, let's say the expansion released in this state, I think it would be similar to Emerald Dream, where the imbue decks were just weak, but they were like 40% something win rate decks, and then you can buff them. But the fact that a lot of the quest decks started with like 20%, 30% win rate, then you had to significantly buff them, not over buff them, not break the game. And now you put them in a position where maybe if they launch like this, it would be fine. But now you don't have another balance window for like a few more weeks to put them in playability. As for the nerfs, I think the main negativity coming from like generally Hearthstone Discord, is at least one that I've seen, and I'm aware that my Discord can be its own echo chamber sometimes, is that like nerfing, first of all, nerfing the powerful stuff is not going to make the quest playable, because there are layers. Like the meta is an onion with a lot of layers. You peel one layer, and there are other layers that come back up. And then decks that you forgot about suddenly show up again and become meta. Like, see Protoss Priest. Who thought about Protoss Priest before the patch? Nobody. But it's a deck from StarCraft. StarCraft as a mini set was heavily nerfed, but the Protoss were relatively untouched compared to Zerg and Terran, which were heavily nerfed. But Protoss did get some nerfs, the Chrono Boost and stuff. So this deck kind of was like, people didn't really think about it. And if you nerf the top outliers now, then maybe Drunk Paladin comes back, or Imbue Druid comes back, or all sorts of layers, decks that were nerfed. They're not particularly powerful, but you keep peeling the onion and you see more layers. The quest decks are at the very middle of the onion. You need to peel the entire onion to get to the quest being playable. So it was always going to be a situation where you nerf some stuff and then old stuff comes back, and people get frustrated because they experienced, so now the meta is just other old decks that we forgot about and are coming back, and we've kind of experienced them already. Like, Protoss Mage is back and now kind of seems kind of good, or Starship Demon Hunter is back again to gain 100 armor per turn and trap me in a game forever. Those things are obviously elicit negative emotions because people want to see something fresh. And they're not getting something fresh. They're getting a laundry that keeps spinning, and whatever's on top stays old. Like it's some other old deck that people got bored by. This is why. I think the execution of the expansion kind of doomed this patch to have people complaining about it no matter what, right? I think there was no outcome in this patch that would have led like a miracle outcome where suddenly half the quest decks are playable all of a sudden. And the meta is fresh was also always very unlikely with the starting position that we had.
So we had a conversation last week, and Pylet, this will validate Pylet because he disagreed with me. I was saying that I think that they could take advantage of the fact that this is a digital game. They're not printing cards that have to go out in packs to everybody. And that for the first like week or maybe 2 weeks before the first balance patch, they could take a lot of the old power and make it cost more, or make it so that way for like the first couple weeks, like take like some card that costs 5 mana, make it cost 7, a bunch of these things across the board to make it harder to play these strategies that are dominating the meta now, and give people more reason to try out the new things and cook and see what comes up with, and then bring everything back to where it was after like the first patch or the first week. And then that way you can say, okay, now where things are, because now people have had a chance to see what these new cards do and what they're like, and they're not just completely blocked out because everyone's playing Mech Warrior and Starship Death Knight and whatnot. Do you think that's a dumb idea, or do you think that there might be some potential there? And you can say it's a dumb idea.
It's an unrealistic idea because it requires you to nerf like 50 cards. Like, if you want to nerf every old deck in existence that is better than the quest decks, you have to nerf like 50 decks. There's like 20 decks that are meta, and then there's another 30 decks that are hiding and you're not aware of that they're probably significantly better than Quest. Do you see Drunk Paladin in the game right now? No. But is it better than Quest? Way more. It's going to be meta way before the Quest. So you have to nerf Drunk Paladin and Imbue Druid and all the Protoss decks and all the Terran decks that you forgot about. You also need to nerf. So you cannot in a single patch nerf like 40, 50 cards just to try and make quests. And you know what the ultimate insult is going to be the outcome is if the quests are just bad, inherently bad cards, you're going to end up seeing quest decks that played without the quest. Like a quest shaman is just going to be a menagerie shaman without the quest because the quest sucks. Like, the quest is not good. So if menagerie shaman is ever good, it's going to be a deck that uses Menagerie Jug as the quest reward rather than Ashelon, right? You have to buff them. Like, you cannot, like, the largest indicator that you had to buff the quest is that most of the quests were worse than Whizbang. Worse than Whizbang. It was better to queue up Whizbang than to queue up these quest decks. So what? Do you need to nerf Whizbang to make these playable, right? Like, it's nonsense. Like, these decks are, like, these quests are just non-functional. So you had to buff them significantly to put them even with a chance of seeing play over Whizbang. Like, if they can't do well against Whizbang. So it's always unrealistic. And the thing is, the danger of nerfing so much stuff is that you will always have, even me. You put me in charge of balancing, and I have the entire data matrix in front of me, and all the decks that see play, I know exactly what their matchup spread. If I am told that I need to nerf everything, I will still miss something, and the power vacuum often creates meta tyrants that just completely take over. Because you treat Hearthstone as a wasteland where you burn everything down, it's easier for a deck to just pop up and completely dominate. Right? The reason why the StarCraft mini set was so impactful, you remember when the StarCraft mini set came out and everybody started playing StarCraft deck, and StarCraft completely dominated until all the StarCraft decks got nerfed. Like, they completely pushed out everything else. The reason why it happened, partly, is because all the previous decks were heavily nerfed in previous patches. It was like a barren wasteland of a weak format, and suddenly you put a good mini set, and it completely dominated. So the theory of let's nerf everything, let's burn everything down so that the new stuff is playable is extremely risky. And as, like, even if you have a live servers game, you have balance patches, they don't have complete freedom of when to execute balance changes. They have very strict time windows, and it has a lot to do with the fact that they're an Apple. It's an app. It's a mobile app that needs to send patches to Apple, and that is a process in itself. You can't just shoot a balance patch whenever you want. You have one window after content, a week and a half to 2 weeks after content, and then you have another window about 3-4 weeks after that, and that's it. Then mini set comes in. That's your balance mode. You can ban things server wide and do, but bans are not balanced, right? Bans is not balanced. Bans is just emergency solutions. So it's just not realistic. Even if you have the most genius data analyzer in the team and he sees all the meta, he's not going to be able to execute good patches where you nerf everything because there's too many unknowns involved.
Well, we do have a genius data validator with us right now. So Pylet, why don't we start talking about how to use this data to be better at Hearthstone? Why don't you lead us into this?
Yeah, so a lot of folks use the VS report to guide to the meta. How do you intend for people to use the report to improve their play?
Well, the report is not inherently meant to improve their play. Like sometimes I will make offhand comments on how to play a specific deck because I will notice in the data that people are doing something wrong with the deck. I can check replays always and learn about how a deck is played. The beauty in my job is that I don't actually need to play Hearthstone in order to do my job well. I can just look at people at Top Legend playing decks and I can understand their experiences. Like I can understand how this deck, okay, so what does this deck do? Sometimes a deck will be unintuitive, extremely unintuitive from looking at it and what its strategy is, and I will explain how to play that. I think that rather than directly improving your play as a Hearthstone player, the VS report puts you in a mindset where you are more motivated to improve and optimize your play. I think the people who read the VS report are people who are already driven to improve. And the report helps them understand, first of all, knowledge in matchups is very important. Because if you know that you're unfavored against something, you queue up into a deck and you know that you're unfavored, you understand that if the game goes exactly as the average game, you're going to lose. So you need to do something. You need to take more risks maybe to put yourself in a better position to win. Like sometimes in a bad matchup, you need to take risks. Knowing if you're in a good matchup or in a bad matchup helps you understand game matchups in a macro perspective that can help you win more. But generally, reading the report will put you in a better mindset of improving because the report is all about optimizing your deck choices, your card choices, understanding, giving you knowledge also of what to potentially counter. Like often we put a meta breaker, right? Every week there's like a deck that stands out above the rest or is more likely to explode. Sometimes the best thing to do is just look at that meta breaker and think, okay, what beats that? What is good against that? How do I beat that? What is its deck weaknesses? And navigating that. And the real meta breaker is what beats the meta breaker, right? When the report is out. Because when the report is out, everybody plays the meta breaker. So you just try to counter it. It just puts you in a better mindset to queue up the right decks and queue up the right strategies and understand how to attack certain decks. Rather than telling you, I can't tell people on turn one, you need to mulligan away this and that card. And in that situation, I can't because I can't be there while you're playing, right? I can't coach you through a game. But I can put you in a mindset of think of how to attack this format. I'm presenting you, this is the format. These are the matchups. How do you want to attack it? This puts you in a position, but it's up to you to execute that.
I think people forget that, yeah, it may be a 40% matchup, but that means you win 4 times out of 10 in theory, and that would make you a Hall of Fame baseball player. One of the interesting things that we talked about a couple weeks ago, we had Pocket Train and Ron Mexico on, and we were talking about discovers, is that a lot of people, like if you're playing a matchup and you know they're going to do this thing, they're going to play low and they're going to play Ceaseless Expanse and then drop a couple giants. And if you know that's coming, people try to plan for that in a like an unfavorable matchup, but like it's going to happen. So if that's going to happen, you're going to lose. So instead of trying to plan to handle that, how can you win the matchup? And if they're going to do that, you're going to lose. But so forget about that. Focus on how you can actually make it so they can't do that, or so you can win before that happens. And that's kind of a mindset, I think, that it's hard to get into.
If they have low ceaseless, then you lose anyway. But if they don't have low ceaseless, you need to make the best possible play for the scenario where they don't have low ceaseless. So you play as if they don't have it. And if they have it, you lose, but you would have lost anyway.
Yep.
But you're not trying to play around something that is impossible to play around. So that is the mindset that you need to be in. So if you're playing against a deck that you know loses to a certain play, no matter what, you need to play into the best case scenario for you, right? And if you are in a favorable spot, right, and you can only lose if they have a specific card, you play around that specific card because you have more to lose, right? You're in a winning position. The only way is if you play into that one specific card that they may have in their hand, so you play around that. Knowing when to play around cards is very important. Sometimes it's correct not to play around anything. And sometimes it's correct to play around everything. And it all depends on whether you're favored or not, whether your deck can answer their turn or not. And that is something that you can get, again, a glimpse of it in the matchup data, right? You can understand, okay, this deck is unfavored. I am extremely unfavored in this deck. Why? Why is that? Well, because they have AoE and I'm playing a board-based deck. So how do I beat that deck? I put my stuff in board and hope they don't have the board-based, the board clear. That's how I win. Because if I have it, they have it, I lose anyway. So all sorts of situations. So yeah, the report doesn't teach you how to play. But it just puts you in a position where you have information to succeed with.
So speaking of that information, next question.
Yeah. So you've kind of mentioned already when talking about the meta breaker deck, and I definitely find myself in that spot a lot where I don't like to play the top, the agreed on top deck because I don't like having a target on my back. So a lot of people though will just kind of grab the decks they think will be good, or those top decks or those meta breaker decks. How much do you think people are losing out on if they don't dig deeper and look at that next layer of it?
I think in general, if you don't, let's say you're basically asking, if you don't take the report into consideration in your game, I think it puts you in a disadvantage, in a clear disadvantage of information. First of all, you don't know what the optimal card choices for your deck are. And, sometimes, I'm not saying every week I produce perfect 30s for everything, but I produce the best cards that are known and played for a specific deck. So sometimes there will be a discovery later, and a week later I'll tell people started playing this card and it's really good, so I'm actually cutting this card to make space for it. So this is a natural thing that happens. However, if you're not even aware of that, you put yourself in a disadvantage because other people who did read the report, they know better what to play, right? And in addition to that, if you don't pay attention to the report, you also don't know what the meta trends are. Like, you don't know what the expected field is going to be. So just you queue up a deck blind, and suddenly you encounter a surge. What happens after a report, especially the first report after content, a surge of optimized, powerful tier 1 decks suddenly run into you straight down your throat. And you suddenly like, oh, what's going on here? What's going on? If you read the report, then you would know that we just said that these decks are really good. So people are going to play them. You have to be aware of them. I think it just puts you in a better mental state too. You're prepared. It's like sometimes if you know a deck is really OP, it feels better to lose to it. Yeah, this deck is really, really powerful right now, so I lost to it, right? Like sometimes I would encounter people who are like out of frustration say, I don't know, I queue into this deck and it's so like I can't beat this deck. And then they go to the report and they see that they're heavily unfavored in a matchup, and in a way it kind of validates them, makes them feel better. Oh, okay, it's a bad matchup. It's not like I'm doing something incredibly wrong here. It's just a bad matchup. I need to accept it or switch decks to do better against that deck. So I think knowledge is always comforting, and knowledge is a good guidance. And I think especially at higher MMR, I think even if you don't follow our specific advice as a top legend player, I think it's silly not to ignore the report, because it just tells you what people are going to play and what cards they're going to play in their decks. It just gives you a lot of information that is free. So why not use it, right? So I think it's always useful for players at all levels of play.
You may not have the perfect 30 every week, but I think you can say you definitely have 29 for sure. Sorry, bad joke.
Sometimes I tell the supporters when I post a deck, this is probably perfect 29. I'm not sure what the 30th card is. I'm going to put that in. That is the 30th best performer in my metrics, and let's see what happens. But a lot of times the supporters just take the deck list and they further experiment with them. And I've had multiple instances where I post a deck list, and the next week the deck changes because these people take the deck list that I posted last week and they optimize them further. Or like World 8 will tell me in a podcast, right? Like World 8, when he wasn't a podcaster, he was one of those people who would take my decks and change a couple of cards that people didn't like. He would ask me, ZachO, what do you think about this card? I don't know. Nobody plays it. And then he would play it and he would post it, and he would they would send them to streamers. Like a lot of our supporters follow streamers. They tell streamers to play certain decks. Those streamers are ultimately the people who make other players play these decks. And then I get new data, and then I tell, oh, okay, this card's actually really good. I just didn't know. Right? There is a limit. I cannot guess a card that doesn't see play. I cannot tell you how good it is. Maybe it's insane in this deck. I cannot know. This is the limitation of working with data, is that when there is no data, I have to navigate with what I have.
And that's kind of one of the things that is frustrating about wanting to play cards that aren't good. And I understand this. Like I have a thing where I like to play cards like when I'm not trying to be better at the game. Let's make that clear. Rye Cleaver, Black Rock and Roll Warrior, whatnot. And these are bad cards. And there's probably a way to make them at least maybe like tier 4, tier 3 or something, but you're not getting enough data to even try to build something around it.
I mean, if I'm not getting enough data, it means the deck is really kind of beyond hope. Usually. Fair. But very often there are decks, I will agree with you, is that sometimes there are decks that are good, but people don't want to play. They just don't want to play because it's boring or whatever. And it makes it hard to optimize them. And maybe if they show up, suddenly, oh, we could actually have done something way better. Like one recent example is like Beast Hunter before this expansion. Beast Hunter was a good deck before this expansion even launched. But it had a very low play rate. Nobody cared. And people played the list that was popularized was a really terrible list. It had a bunch of one-offs with like Direwolf Alpha. It had some terrible cards. And I wanted to optimize it, but I couldn't because nobody, it just didn't have a sample. And now, the fact that Beast Hunter is good right now, by the way, it's the best deck on the climb to legend. This is literally the best deck in the game right now, Beast Hunter. It's not a surprise to me because I knew even before the expansion that this deck was good. But only now I have a chance to optimize it because people are actually playing it. Because it's the number one deck. So I agree with you. There is an element of limitation that's kind of frustrating. But I think if you are in the mindset of I want to play a bad deck, then just play a bad deck. Who cares about the cartridge? You want to optimize, you want to optimize a bad deck. You're already suboptimal by playing a terrible deck. So just go with the flow. If that's the mentality, right? It shouldn't be. But I agree, it is a limitation.
Well, I mean, you want to play a bad deck, but you also want to, win 40% rather than 35%. You want to be the
guy that makes that bad deck good.
Yes. Right? That's how you get popular. What you were just talking about right there, as far as what we talk about not having the optimization there. A while ago, a few years ago, they brought back Classic. And before they made it Twist and before they stopped talking about Twist and whatnot. But I thought one of the most interesting things was when we first started playing Classic, Vanilla, whatever you want to call it, the base set, maybe even Naxxramas or whatever. We didn't have all the stats. So decks that we might have thought were good or cards that we might have thought are good might have been trash and all that. How is that experience being able to look at stats on decks now that we can do stats when that came back and say, oh, hey, no one wanted to play Shaman because it wasn't good, but it actually was really good or stuff like that. Was that an interesting time for you?
Oh, it was super fascinating. I loved doing the Classic report. Because I really wanted to see, because I remember playing Classic and I really wanted to see whether we would optimize decks differently. And we did. If you look at the Classic report, some of the deck lists, there are some ideas there that you didn't think about, like Control Warrior needs to be a lot more active than what it was actually. The deck list that people played Control Warrior in Classic were far too passive. Like Kokron Elite was a good card in Control Warrior. Harvest Golem was mega overrated. It was actually a really bad card, but people liked it because it was kind of sticky. So people just played it for a board presence, and 3-drops were not that great. But Farseer was always better. Farseer was always the better 3-drop compared to Hover Skull, and this is not something that people were aware of at the time. So yeah, there was definitely fascinating. I really wish we could have played BlackRock. I wish we had the BlackRock for, because I really wanted to see how modern Patron Warrior would perform. Because Patron Warrior sort of had a mythical status of like highest skill cap ever. Like that. Since then, obviously, some rogue decks popped up and showed like Garrote Rogue and Sonya Rogue are more skill intensive than Patron Warrior by a distance, in my opinion. But I really wanted to be able to see that. So like, I really wish I had the data for pre-Whisper time, because the report started in Whispers. That would have been great. But yeah, definitely making Classic Report was really fun because of all this information. And definitely Classic was not optimized at all, and people were playing terrible decks. Like Face Hunter, after the nerf to Unleash, was actually garbage. It was a terrible deck, but people thought it was good, but it was bad. That was probably the most surprising thing. But because you wouldn't think Face Hunter would be bad in Classic. It was pretty good, right? Yeah, Unleash 2 and Buzzard 2, it was probably really strong. But after they nerfed it, the deck was really, really bad. And Freeze Mage was horrendous. Like, all the copers of Freeze Mage, like that was the world without data. People were playing decks that were bad, but nobody could tell how bad they were, which was fascinating.
I think that's the biggest miss that not necessarily Team 5, but whoever just makes the decisions about what they do. Like, they had the Classic, and then instead they turned it into Twist, and they tried to do the whole thing there. But they could have just done what WoW's doing with Classic.
I wanted them to play the clock of all the years. I wanted them every month switch to an expansion. Go to Nextramus a month later, go to the GVG, then BlackRock, and then do the whole thing from start to finish. I think that would have been far more interesting. And for me, as an analyzer, I would have been really, really curious to see how these formats would have shaped differently and with modern data, right? With the modern analysis that we have now. I'm pretty sure things were super suboptimal, both card choices and knowledge of decks. And there were things that, like Druid, Savage Roar, Force of Nature Druid, Ramp Druid, back at the time, was far more powerful than people thought it was. It was significantly better than people thought it was. People thought, it was a good meta deck at the time. People thought, Druid, Savage Roar, yeah, it was busted. Mm-hmm. It was way more powerful than a lot of things. Just people didn't have that knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, and it could have been the easiest win for them too, right? Hey, let's resell Naxxramas packs or GVG packs or whatever like that, because we have that. And when they did that as a twist, it was great, except they did it one day at a time. And if you missed a day because you had stuff, you didn't get a chance to, I wanted to play this meta. You didn't really have time. So yeah, take that out, spread it out, and just keep looping it around. And I think that would have been a format that would have done well. But Pylet, what's our next question?
Yeah, so you talked a lot about optimizing decks. There's a lot of times when you release the reports, you'll have other cards that you could swap in. What goes into the decision to add those options on there to where you say, this card could be this, or you could play this package of cards instead?
Well, there are multiple scenarios where that can happen. One is sometimes cards are just too similar in their power where there is no clear decision on what's better. And then I'll say, these cards are very close in power. Play what you like, whatever. Maybe I'll have more data on it next week and I'll know what's better, right? Sometimes cards are just better in different situations. And that could be different in matchups specific and also rank specific. Very often you see top legend format is very different from diamond. Usually when I want to optimize decks, I have two goals in mind. Optimize it for top legend and optimize it for the diamond climb to legend. Those are the two main focuses that I have. Because the way I see it, if you want to improve in the game, you can significantly improve more at the game, playing from low ranks, gold, silver, plat. If you're these ranks of Hearthstone, it doesn't matter what cards you play, because you have so much to improve without even optimizing your decks. That's not important. The critical bottlenecks of where ladder is most competitive, where every edge can matter, is Upper Diamond and Top Legend. So sometimes for a deck that sees play in both of those rank brackets, the answers would be different. Sometimes at Top Legend, there's a card that's really good, and it's not good at Diamond ranks, and the opposite happens. So in those situations, I would make split decisions. Sometimes the deck only sees play. Like if it's like a Psycho Rogue deck, the only people who play it is at Top Legend, so I optimize it for Top Legend players. And if there's a deck that's only being played at Diamond, I will optimize it for Diamond because the only people who are playing at Diamond, the Top Legend players are not going to pick it up. People are not, Top Legend players are not playing Menagerie Death Knight, so I'm just going to make this deck as good as possible for people who play Diamond. What are the best card choices there? But sometimes the deck sees play in both ranks, and the answers could be different. And then it becomes tricky, because I'll put a card in. If I just optimize for Diamond, the Top Legend players would take my deck list and say, no, this is not optimal for where I'm playing. This is not good for where I'm playing. And they would be right. So I use different thresholds. Let's say I use in my dashboard, I have a way to optimize for those different rank groups, different cards, and see how they perform in different rank brackets. Sometimes the difference would be because the field is different, mostly because of that, right? You'd see like Top Legend has normally more slower decks, so like removal AoE tends to be weaker. It's not a rule, but it often happens that I have to do both things. But it's not super common. Usually there's the best card, and usually I would not need that. But in those cases, then I do, and I mention it, I talk about it in the write-up in the cost section too.
How often do you feel like you do everything stat based and whatnot, but sometimes maybe you have like a low sample size and you put a deck out there and all of a sudden that deck becomes really good because you had a little bit of stats and people start playing it and then you optimize it. How much does the VS report ever feel like a self-fulfilling prophecy where you could say, hey, this deck is good, and then people play it and then make it good? Or is it just kind of these are just the numbers?
I don't think that we're a self-fulfilling prophecy. I think the case of VS, the best way to look at it is that VS is an accelerator of meta developments that were already happening. If a deck is good and nobody knows about it, we put the word out earlier, right? Then otherwise people would know. If we highlight a deck, this deck has a 1% play rate and it's nuts, right? Then maybe if there was no report, people would look at HS Guru and they would see this deck have a high win rate, but they wouldn't be so sure. They would pick it up slower. But if we put this deck, this deck is nuts, and we would put in the write-up, this deck is busted. This deck is insane. Then people would be quicker to play it. And if a deck is bad, people are quicker to drop it because of the VS report. We're an accelerator. We're not driving the meta. We just put the pedal to the metal when it comes to its developments. So if there's a deck, if there's a deck with a low sample size and I know that it's good, or I'm somewhat confident that it's good, I will put it, even if it's not like I can't know what the best card choices is. Because ultimately, a lot of people think the report makes the meta worse because it optimizes the meta too fast and people are playing the most powerful decks with the most powerful cards and becomes really hard to win because of that. But I think, again, the report is a mirror to the format. If the format is good and diverse and there are a lot of options, the VS report highlights that, magnifies these options, tells people, look how much stuff you can play that you're not even aware of. Sometimes we have formats in Hearthstone where there are more playable decks than people can even manage, can even think of, right? And they don't think about it. Maybe there's a really good deck that they could enjoy and they weren't even aware of it, and the VS report highlights it. So when the meta is good, then the VS report helps it be even better because it gives decks that are underplayed or are underexplored the chance to shine, puts the spotlight on them. But if the meta is bad, or if the meta is imbalanced and there's a meta tyrant and it's unstoppable, then obviously accelerating that meta is not the best, right? It makes the meta worse in a way, or faster, because everyone aware, this deck is just busted, so everybody's playing it. But it can also, even in those situations, be helpful if there's a counter. Okay, is there a way to stop this deck? Yes, there's actually a deck. If you want to beat it, you can play this. So I don't agree, I don't prescribe to the theory that VS makes the meta worse, especially in the current climate where balance changes happen so often, right? Like maybe if there was, a reports in GVG or Naxxramas, and we would tell people that Undertaker was completely broken and Undertaker Hunter was insanely overpowered, right? Then people would have known it. And, if you think back to Naxxramas, people don't think about this meta as like there was this meta tyrant that was unstoppable. People weren't even aware of just how bad things were in terms of how broken Hunter was back then. But on the other hand, if a report existed there earlier, it would have driven Team 5 to actually nerf things faster. So, I don't know. I know that there's an impact, obviously, but I don't think we determine what the meta is. We just put a mirror on the meta and tell people this is how things are, and they know it faster, and they can respond to it faster too. It's an accelerator. That's how I would call it.
No, you said a couple times, like, it's like an onion to peel this apart. And a lot of times, like, you will tell us, at least on the podcast, like, hey, like, this deck is good, this deck is good, this deck is good, this deck's holding this deck back, but if this comes, this goes out. And it's like, you're like Charlie with like the, from Always Sunny in Philadelphia with the murder board there with all the things going around there. How deep does that go when you're like, because like, how that has to be pretty complicated, because you're like, well, this has 30, this one's holding this deck back, but that's playing this deck. And then if we nerf all these, we end up with sharper DH. So, like, you're ahead of these things a lot of time, but how deep do you go, and how do you figure that all out with the stats you have at a high level, obviously?
I, like, know probably better than anyone else what balance changes will have, what kind of impact they will have on the meta, because I have the capability of simulating the format. The only thing that I have, the limitation I have, is that I cannot tell what decks that currently don't exist if they suddenly pop up, right? But if I have tools that allow me to basically, what happens if I delete this deck from the game? What happens to the rest of the decks and how they line up, right? What would happen if I severely weaken this decks? Like, I have, obviously there's matchup spread, and you can technically look at a matchup spread and do something similar. But the way that I do it makes it a lot easier in my work, and it puts me in a great position to predict in advance what's going to happen to a format. And I can tell you, I mean, you would already know, there were multiple instances where I warned Team 5 about a deck that they needed to nerf if they nerfed this, and that. They didn't do it. And then that deck ended up being a tyrant and taking over the format. It happened multiple times. I can tell you right now, in this balance patch, in this patch, I was concerned, like, my immediate concern, knowing these nerfs, was that spell damage druid would be too good. As a result of all of these nerfs and all the interchangeables, I did a simulation. My simulation told me spell damage druid is going to be crazy even with low nerfed. And I warned people. And unfortunately, only low was nerfed. And spell damage druid is going to take over Top Legend right now. It's looking like one of the best decks at Top Legend, alongside another one. But I definitely have the capabilities. And sometimes it's frustrating. Because yes, I can give that feedback, right? I can warn in advance, but obviously I don't have full control over it. So these instances will happen. But yes, I have a very advanced way of knowing the impact of balance changes in ways that people just simply do not. And I don't even think that Team 5 have that capability, as you can see.
You're like that guy in the movie that's warning everybody that the aliens are coming and no one listens to, and then then they come.
Sometimes they listen. For example, like if they didn't nerf, like, instances, like 2 decks that needed to be nerfed in this patch, absolutely needed to be nerfed, was Murmur Shaman and Wilted Priest. These are decks that, let's say, if I was in a position of giving feedback and knew that about the things that were nerfed, I would tell Team 5, you gotta nerf these. These are going to go crazy. If you don't touch them. So nerfing them was correct. So sometimes that feedback goes through, and sometimes we help prevent things from, spinning out of control. But obviously there will be instances where, again, when you make so many nerfs, it becomes increasingly difficult to predict what's going to come. Like Protoss Priest was not particularly on my radar as something that I would need to keep in mind if everything was nerfed, because it's so many layers of nerf. It's a good deck, right? It's not busted, but it is very powerful. But you cannot, what I do know is using my program or using my tools, the more nerfs you make, the less reliable the product is, the prediction is, because you're inserting more uncertainties into the equation, which is why, in my opinion, balance changes should not be hugely transformative unless there's a patch window quickly after that you can utilize, right? Because if you like, the process of nerfing everything and buffing everything is really risky. Sometimes you don't have a choice because you launch an expansion the way you did. But if you do have a choice, you'd rather not. So the whole last year and a half, where there was a heavy churn of a lot of balance changes, every patch it feels like they're nerfing 10 cards or 12 decks or whatever, is not healthy for the format. It's unlikely to be balanced, and it's unlikely to be reliable ways to address whatever issues there are.
You can feel free not to answer this because it might be trade secrets, and I don't want you to, give away any trade secrets. But could you take your tools and take decks from different periods of time and different metas and have them like simulate against each other or whatever, and then like kind of see like, hey, like have a tournament of some of the best decks and who would win and who would be good and who would not be good? Or is it all just based on current stats?
No, it's not about simulating matchups. It's not about simulating the gameplay itself. It's about simulating the current matchups. I can't take decks from the past and put them in a simulated game against another deck and say who wins. No, I don't have that capability. But what I do have a capability is, for example, if pros, for example, seek my advice, and they have in the past, of building lineups to competitive tournaments, I can tell you, I can ask them, okay, what do you think is the expected field is going to be, right? Like that is because you cannot predict what the field is. You have to put a certain estimate on, okay, I expect them to play this and this and that deck. And then I can tell them, oh, for this lineup for this field that you expect, I think this deck would be really good, right? Like I can give them sort of advice in that way. But no, I don't have the capability to simulate games.
That's fair, but I think that brings us to our next question. Pylet, what do you think?
Yeah, so using the data and information that are in the reports, how can people use that to plan matchups for qualifiers or for things like league play, like THL, where you're playing Conquest?
I mean, if you don't use data, then you just put yourself in a huge disadvantage. Like it's just straight up. I've had players that some of them played in Grandmasters, if you remember, in the Grandmaster program.
Mm-hmm.
I've had multiple tournament winners that worked with me privately, obviously. And some of them had their own tools to simulate fields based on matchups, right? They would input certain popularity of decks, and they would simulate a certain field, and then what decks would pop up to be good against that field. Obviously, if you're playing a casual tournament and you're just there to have fun, the best thing to do is just to play the best decks that you're best at, right? But if you want to take it seriously and you want to fully optimize it, then obviously you can use data, and you don't need a massive simulator, right? You can just think of, okay, what decks I expect to be popular? Are there any decks that are really good against multiple of those? You have to think about that, and you have to use matchup data in order to give yourself the best chance to win. And in terms of advice that I've given also in the past, sometimes when it comes to tournaments, things get more complicated, right? Because sometimes data on ladder is not reflective of tournaments, not because of the level of play necessarily, but because of card choices. Like sometimes, maybe in situations where you ban class, or something gets banned, or there's a popular card that maybe there's a card that the deck on ladder 50% of the builds run it, but in tournaments everyone's going to bring that card, right? that changes things. So giving people advice on how a matchup could potentially change, like sometimes I would tell you, the matchup right now between deck A and deck B is 55-45. But if you add this card to your deck, it will turn into 60-40. That's something that only a person with all the data in front of them and is capable of doing the delta of like knowing how to estimate the win rate, expected win rate with the addition of this card can do. Because I can basically highlight that card and mark it, and then take all the data related to it and simulate what the matchup would be if everyone ran this card. So yeah, definitely data is a powerful tool for any competitive environment.
So you give us the stats on, hey, this deck plays against this deck at a 60% win rate, 40%, whatever. But that factors in just pure numbers and not necessarily the person's level of play. How do you skew that for like someone that maybe not as good or better or like that? Like, or is it just negligible and it doesn't really matter?
I mean, we have matchup data for different rank brackets, right? Like people can look at on the website, if you're a top legend player, you can look at how the matchup goes at top legend. And sometimes there will be deviations again because of card choices and whatever. But I think the bottom line is it's not too important to know what the exact number is when it applies on ladder. Just understanding if the matchup is close, whether it's 52-48 or whether it's 54-46, it's enough to compute that you know that the matchup is close. Or if the matchup is 64 or 66 or 67, it doesn't matter as much as what the application is that you know that you're unfavored or you know that you're favored. Ultimately, the purpose of the data is to give the person who is reading the reports information to apply to their game knowledge. So whether it's 1% here or 1% there, it's not too important. What's important is the final conclusion is, how does this matchup generally go? That's what you need. Like whether it's 67% or 65% doesn't change how you're going to play the game, right? You just know that you're favored, and that's the important part. Ultimately, we can nitpick on percentages, but it doesn't really change what the conclusion is. The important thing is the conclusion. Especially when it comes to ladder. You're playing on ladder. You just want conclusions. And that's what I try to do.
So in conclusion, do you have if you have any final advice for users of the VS report?
I actually thought a lot about what I expected that you guys to ask me about how to use the report. I think my best advice is to tell people to read it. And the reason why I'm saying it is because a lot of people just look at the graphs and they look at the power ranking table and they look at the matchups and they don't look. Let me tell you something. The write-up is far more valuable than the graphs, because the graphs is the output of the data. As it is, it's a black box. You don't know what's within it, right? When you look at a popularity of an archetype, you don't really understand what kind of cards they use, whether it's trending up, whether it's trending down, whether it's declining, right? When you look at a win rate, you don't know, is this deck refined? Is it not refined? Is this deck high skill, no skill, whatever? The write-up is the product of me sitting, sweating, thinking about every single factor in a deck's performance, every single factor in a deck's choices, and that is what is brought to the write-up. The write-up is truly my work, right? That is the product of me looking at the data and interpreting it. Ultimately, that is significantly more important than the graphs. You can read the report without looking at a single graph, and you will gain most of what you need to have more knowledge and know how to do better on ladder. Whether it's a deck that you choose or it's a card choices that you choose, the write-up is the most valuable thing in the report. And I'm saying this because I'm an old man, relatively, and you guys are also my generation, kind of. You know how like the ADHD generation is, the low attention span, that they don't read, they don't look at things for more than 3 seconds. And my advice to them is to sit back, relax, read the report, 10 minutes of your time every week, and you will become significantly more knowledgeable about Hearthstone. Just read.
Yeah, I will say that even just listening to the podcast that you do, and I recommend everybody, if you don't, after you listen to Bread and Butter, you should definitely be listening to the Vicious Syndicate report, because that I take so much out of that podcast and I apply it to the things that I'm learning in the meta, and I get ahead of things and I understand a lot more just from that. So we appreciate the work that you do, and it definitely helps all of us. Pylet, you got any last questions or?
No, I think that answered a lot of my questions.
So we do have one more interview question for you, Zach, and this is probably the most important thing we will ask you all day. What is your favorite dessert?
Tiramisu.
Oh, winner. Winner. That's my favorite too. Love it. So everybody, as usual, if you like the show, give us a 5-star review. Remember, we are not a pyramid scheme, we're an obelisk scheme. So just tell one person that you like the show and that they should listen to it, and that'll help us kind of, grow. We also have a Patreon now. It's Bread and Butter HS over there. We post the raw audio, so you would actually be able to hear this afternoon if on a Saturday, if you wanted to. We also have a channel that lets you give us, if you wanted to know, ask Zach something specific, you've always wanted to ask Zach something, you could have given us that question and we could have asked him that. We're there. We like to, help out. So, ZachO, where can people find you on social media besides the Vicious Syndicate report, obviously?
My biggest recommendation for contact me is through Discord. There's the VS Discord. It's available on the website. You can link into it. That's probably the best way to find me. I don't really use Twitter as much, or X as much as I used to. So the best place where I'm most active is Discord. Yeah, I've had some people contact me also through DM on Discord before on all sorts of things with help or stuff. By the way, I do want to say I do help pro players for free if they seek my advice, and they have done in the past. So I don't mind helping them. I've answered multiple queries like that, so I'm always open and happy to help whoever in need. And if you have specific questions about the report or anything at all, you can ask in the Vicious Syndicate Discord, and there are a lot of nice people there who can also answer for you very often questions that you have about the report, about decks, about card choices and such.
And if your MMR is 2,000 or greater, you can get Zach's help for $49.99 per hour. Just give him your Venmo. Just kidding. Pylet, where can people find you?
You can mainly find me on Discord, Pylet712. That's Pylet. And then also on Twitter.
And you can find me on Tito Santana HS on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, TikTok, and anywhere else. I stream often from 9 to 12 Eastern Standard Time. Most of the time, Hearthstone, Friday Night Civilization. Zach, do you have anything you'd like to shout out or promote this week?
Shout out to you guys. Thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate it. I had a lot of fun with this interview. It was different from what I'm used to. I still talked a lot, but I felt like a guest rather than, the guy in the house, in his own house. So it was pretty cool.
That's one of the things I like to try to do, because a lot of times you'll have a guest on a podcast and they'll have a little section where they talk to them and then they do their thing and the guest is kind of, maybe participating, but kind of pushed aside a little bit. And like, you're here, you're giving your time. We want people to know who you are and get the information and the education that most of our guests give. So we definitely appreciate you being on as well. Pylet, you have anybody you'd like to shout out or promote this week?
Yeah, just a shout out to you, ZachO. Thank you for coming on, and shout out to all the VS crew in general. Definitely check them out, both the website and the podcast, for the information that they provide.
And I will shout out World 8 for no other fact that he's awesome and he's kind of the glue between our shows. So thanks, World 8, for being you. It's been awesome. But anyway, guys, I think we're toast. We'll see ya.
See ya.
like two brothers meet one another when they slide up to the mic. It's bread and butter with one another. Let's start up that recording light.